What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Bruce Springsteen's Tracks 2 box set, his recent release of 7 lost albums, material that was recorded in the past that never got released, sort of compiled into 7 discs that feel like they could be officially like album releases. I think several of them should have been released. One could argue that all of them should have been released, and I think Springsteen's his discography and his career would be more reflective of somebody like a Neil Young. That's like, oh, he was in the mood to do this and he did it. Yay, that's cool. Which I think, now that we're like towards the end, unfortunately, of Neil Young's career, it's like, thank you for doing all those indulgent things all those decades, because you're not going to be able to make music forever, and the more we can deep dive into, the better. But I will say this, now that I'm at the end of these 7, I enjoyed this listen a lot. And a lot of times, I know myself, if an artist that's been around for as long as, I'm going to use Neil Young as an example, releases a new album, I will always check it out. Sometimes I like it, but then I always ask myself, when I'm in the mood to listen to this artist, am I going to reach for the new one, or am I just going to go back to something older? And I really think at least half of this box set, I'm excited to going back and listening to again when I'm in the Springsteen mood again. There is some really good stuff on here. I've only listened to each one of them a handful of times at this point in order to do these reviews, but I'm super excited to see which ones grow on me, to see if I'm not as enamored as some as I immediately was in the beginning. But let's get on to this one, Perfect World, the 7th in the box. I'm going to talk about it, not play music from it, rank it among the other 6 when I'm done. This is a variety of material recorded from 1994 through 2011. So it doesn't have quite the same sort of thematic cohesion as almost all the other discs do, other than the Garage Sessions. That was maybe the one that had the most sort of diversity in the material, but that was in a Born in the USA era, which had a lot of diversity sort of on that album. This one, 10 songs, and I do think like I just naturally think of any album in terms of side A, side B. When you have 10 songs, first 5 feel like the first side of the album, the second 5 feel like the second half. I think the first 5, the first half of this album, is really, really strong. The sequencing of the songs themselves, we go from like full-on Bruce rock and roll energy. I think the earliest tracks were recorded in 94, 95. And then the songs kind of get more mid-tempo to kind of ballady to really kind of acoustic and gentle. And that 5-song progression on the first half, fantastic. We get to the second half, and the first song is like a shorter, bigger, louder kind of guitar rocker. But then we have 2 of the longest songs on the album, which is 5 minutes of this. But we get 10 minutes of sort of like mid-tempo Bruce balladness, balladness that doesn't immediately jump out at me. These weren't 2 songs that I immediately was like, oh, I can't wait to go back to those. And then we end with some rock sound and then another soft acoustic thing to end the title track. And so I think the second half just doesn't feel as cohesive and as like successful. The second half doesn't feel as successful as the first half, but there is still some good stuff on here. The first 3 songs were all co-written with someone named Joe Grushecki, an artist out of the Midwest, I believe. I think they were songs released on his album several years after they were recorded, which I think was in mid-90s. Bruce has played them, I think, live a handful of times, but really, really probably the strongest material on here. Kind of political, but not specifically mentioning things political, but being very much like the first one is I'm Not Sleeping, and it's just a great rocker. Almost has this Promised Land vibe to start out with. It's a little busier once we get to the actual, like, after the intro is over, there's these weird little changes that feel a little atypical to a Bruce song, but it still works. Not too elaborate, but just minor little drops that are like, that's kind of interesting. But it's kind of about like reading the news of the day and just being overwhelmed. And I'm not sleeping because there's just so much information to consume, and I'm trying to like live life. It's just a really, really solid, good rock song. Starts off the album really well. Second song Idiot's Delight. We have a little more acoustic harmonic action. It's a little bluesier, but it's still like this nice, really good mid-tempo rock song. Gravelly voice Bruce, stomp and rhythm section. First line, he meets St. Peter at the pearly gates, and St. Peter's just heartbroken about what has become of humanity. Look at the mess. It's now just a bunch of Idiot's Delight. Great organ in here, some really great guitar playing, some like rock and roll guitar playing. Excellent second song. And then the third song is the third of the Joe Grusecki trilogy. Another thin line, a little more slower, calmer sort of rock pop, kind of about living life and just kind of struggling through the day-to-day of, everyday life. But there's some really nice organ, some really tasty, aggressive rock guitar comes in at the end. It's just, that's almost like a not Bruce Springsteen type guitar sound. Really strong start. Excellent 3 songs. The next song is called The Great Depression. It is not about the Great Depression. It is about someone whose significant other breaks up with him and he knows it's his fault. She pretty much tells him so. He kind of knows it, and thus that is The Great Depression. Has a nice rollicking acoustic vibe, but kind of soft and bouncy and gentle. And then the 5th song, which kind of wraps up this first half of the album perfectly, is called Blind Man. Another just slower, gentler acoustic number. The singing at the beginning is kind of flirting with like some low-key, more recent Dylan, kind of like, very affected Bruce type stuff, but it works. But a really good first half. Really, really strong first half. And from here, I kind of don't think anything on the second half is as successful as either one of those 5 songs. So there is kind of this drop-off. Next is Rain in the River, just this stomping, guitar-infused, loud, kind of brash production-wise, little gospel-y, seeping into the energy rock number. It builds really nicely. The guitar solo comes in and it's really nice and melodic and kind of just feels like it belongs in the song. A pretty good song, but I don't think it's as successful as the 3 rockers on side the first half of the album. If I Could Only Be Your Lover, soft acoustic ballad, really chill, kind of builds. It just didn't really leave its mark on me the first couple times I listened to it. And then the next song is called Cutting Knife. Also is a little more low-key and ballady. You have this piano, acoustic guitar. In the middle, you have this sort of like, almost like Father John Misty-esque orchestral swell in the middle with like, I think it's synths, not actual orchestra, but like just this build and like some choral voices. It turns into like this big sounding ballad, and just back to back in the middle of the second half of the album. I think these 2 songs, both running more than 5 minutes, kind of drag down this part. At least the first couple of times, I didn't really engage with them. You Lifted Me Up, bigger, almost like a mid-tempo arena rock song. It sounds like a big Bruce song. And then Perfect World, soft, acoustic, gentle with a very, very Bruce delivery. Not bad. I just think it gets weaker as it goes on. And I'm assuming that, I don't know what the dates are on a lot of these other than the Grusecki things, which I'm pretty sure were recorded in like the mid-90s. So I'm assuming that the 1994 to 2011, as we go through the songs, they're more recent. And so maybe that matches with, the quality of Bruce's stuff, but he also has some really, really, really good releases recently. So who knows? But yeah, a solid listen. Glad it's in the box. First half is better than the second half. If I were going to rank it among the other 6 that I've already done, I have it right there at number 5. I do think it's a bottom half. I think those top 4 are the ones I'm going to run to first. Now that this project is over and I'm feel more free to go back and revisit those earlier ones. Super excited to revisit number 1, that country one. That one, to me, for my ears, was clearly the best in this box set, and I think should have been released back when it was recorded. I think it would have changed the narrative on Bruce Springsteen's career in just enough of a way to make it a little more interesting, and maybe the success of something like that would have encouraged other sort of indulgent releases. But that's the best of them. That's my favorite so far. But none of them were bad. Some were far more interesting than others. But yeah, that's it for now. I am going to make one short video and just go through all 7 briefly for those who don't want to watch all of these in case, whatever, just cause, why not? But anyways, That's all I got for now. Let me your thoughts on this album, on the box set, on Bruce, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. If you know Joe Grusecki, I think I'm going to check him out now. That was someone I was not familiar with. So I'm going to go check him out and see what he does with these songs that he helped write and see what kind of a discography he has. But anyways, thanks for watching. That's all I got. Peace. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do those things. And peace. Talk to you later.